Hello and welcome to AS.NET MVC sessions. My name is Mahesh Panhale and I'll be giving you training on AS.NET MVC. So we'll start from very basic part like why do we require AS.NET MVC. So to start with certain background that we require for this session. We are assuming that you all have some hands-on experience on AS.NET Web Forms and also that you understand HTML, JavaScript and C Sharp because we'll be using HTML, JavaScript to do, I can say, client-side programming, and we'll use C Sharp to do the server-side programming. So be relaxed and we'll start with AS.NET MVC. So let's try to understand first why do we really require AS.NET MVC. As you may know, as you have worked on AS.NET Web Forms, it comes with certain flaws. So first problem with AS.NET Web Forms is how do we do the unit testing for the code behind part? If at all we have a business logic written, definitely we can do the unit testing of that business logic. We can create a class object. We can very well call any method that we want with some dummy parameters or some testing inputs, and we can test the output as well. But then when we talk about ASP.NET code behind, that is aspx.cs file, suppose, how do you do unit testing of those files? And when it is mandatory to do unit testing of each and every function that you write down, then you may notice that we can't actually go and do the unit testing of the code behind files. Why? Because those handlers which normally you double click on button, there is an event handler generated like button underscore click, and wherein you must have written some code which is like accessing controls from the UI itself. Now those functions you cannot unit test because those functions you never call by yourself. Those functions are automatically called in the life cycle of ASP.NET. And at any point of time, if you decide even to go for unit testing, you will have to create object of page. You will have to call those methods by yourself. But then the scene is completely different. The class is not normal class then. It's a page class and which basically is created somewhere down in the hierarchy of life cycle. Because before page gets initialized, there is a class like handler gets initialized. And before handler gets initialized, maybe the ASP.NET worker process will come in picture. So to reach to that function, reach to that method, there is so much of decoration required. And that normally we cannot just go and simulate while we do the unit testing. And as a reason, it becomes very difficult to do unit testing of each and every code in ASP.NET. And major code is code behind. So do you want to do that? Hold on, we have a solution which is ASP.NET MVC. Then we have another thing which is HTML generation or control of HTML generation. In ASP.NET, can we control HTML generation? Can we take a complete control over what HTML to be generated and what not to be generated? Can we really do that? If you ask a question, we can't. Reason behind that, HTML generation is completely done by ASP.NET Engine. And then we don't have any control over it. So what at the max is left in your and my hand is we should just go for maybe dragging and dropping some HTML controls. That way we can decide like what HTML to generate. But that's not always going to help us in server-side programming. In that case, if at all we drag and drop so-called ASP.NET Grid, and if at all we see the output of HTML type which is generated, that HTML will always be table TRTD. What if I don't want table TRTD? What if I want something different? In that case, grid, no matter what happens, will always go for table TRTD because that's what it is meant for. So can we really decide what HTML to generate for server-side controls? So we cannot. And that's where we lack the complete control over HTML generation. But why would I require it first of all? Suppose we want to go for some new standard like HTML5. In that case, can ASP.NET 4.0, can it offer us HTML5 generation? No, because the default output type is XHTML 1.1. So if you have to decide what HTML to generate or what output to generate, You yourself will have to take the complete control. How? We have an answer. That will be again MVC. Same thing which I talked about. Next, third parameter is HTML standard compliance. What if I want HTML5 specific APIs or features to be included in the ASP.NET output? We cannot do that because we are not controlling the output. And the last part that we have is bulky view state. If you see ASP.NET web page defined and same page if we define in JSP or PHP, you'll find out JSP and PHP is always on the faster side. Reason behind that? The response is low in size. And why is ASP.NET bulky in size? It's because of this concept called view state. Because ASP.NET always tries to comfort you by giving you the duplicate value of the control itself. Though it is zipped, though it is compressed, though it is encrypted, still it actually costs something. And that particular cost is so huge that ASP.NET turns out to be difficult in terms of, you can say, response size compared to PHP or JSP. So we just cannot stand in competition if at all we go for ASP.NET web forms because we have used it. Can't we just go and disable the view state? We can definitely, but that's a default state handling mechanism for the same form when, you can say, request flows and the response comes, which is same page itself. So if at all we want no view state, then we ourselves will have to handle most probably the get and post, and then we may have to maintain the data for the control either on the client side or server side using other state management techniques like maybe cookies, query strings, or server side sessions or application variables. So default technique is view state, and which is by default going to go and make the page bulky, though we have a solution for the fourth part. So how do we go and use MVC and how MVC is, you can say, structured? So to understand that part, we are going to go and do some basic study first. So we are going to understand a concept which is called as HTTP handler concept first, and then we are going to understand a concept which is called sequential calling of a method. How do we ensure a specific call or sequential call of the method? So that is simple OOP concept we are going to go and understand, and then we will touch MVC. So thank you for attending at least this part, you can say patiently, and we'll get back to you in a while.